Hello everyone. In today's lesson we're going to take a look at a concept called amortization, which is what is used for mortgages. We all know that buying a house is a pretty big decision, and it's probably going to be the biggest debt that most people are going to carry, and often that can be a little bit daunting to think ahead and see, well, how much money am I going to have to pay off on this house? Luckily, there are ways of borrowing the money to be able to pay for a mortgage, and that is usually done through a bank, but there are other places where you can get mortgages as well. And this is actually a very special kind of loan. Now, the money does have to be paid back, and the institution that's going to give you the money is definitely going to charge you interest on that money. You're going to have to pay back that money plus the interest. So there are fees involved. These aren't just the fees in purchasing the house, the price of the house itself. You're going to sometimes have application fees. You're going to have mortgage brokers fees if you go with a I can't say that word, a mortgage broker. Basically what a mortgage broker is a company that will look up a whole bunch of different mortgages at different institutions for you and try to find you the best price, but you usually have to pay those people to do that. It can be worth it if they get you a better deal than you would normally get yourself. You're going to have to pay for a lawyer to take a look at a whole bunch of different things when it comes to transferring the house and what are the legalities involved with that. Land transfer taxes that the city might charge you. If you want to have a home inspection done to see if the home is free of needing significant repairs, there's going to be a cost to that. And there's also costs involved with the CMHC, which is the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation. Usually that has to do with people who may not be able to do the full down payment on the house, or the recommended down payment on a house, or if you're doing the minimum down payment on a house. Sometimes, I'm not a financial advisor here, so I'm not exactly sure how it works, but from what I remember purchasing my own houses, basically it's insurance in case you default on your mortgage, and that way they are going to be able to pay off the house for you if you can't pay it yourself. So there's a little bit more involved within that, but I will let you research that on your own time when you're ready to buy your own home. So the way that we're going to do the calculation of how to pay off a mortgage is through what we call an amortization table. Now, the word amortization means the gradual elimination of a liability such as a mortgage in regular payments over a specified period of time. So what happens is the bank is going to say, okay, well, you are buying a house that's $300,000. We're going to charge you a certain amount of interest. So by the time you're done paying the house, you're going to be actually charged $450,000. You've got 25 years to do that. Here are your regular payments that you're going to do every month to be able to do that. And as you can see by the text here, when you do these payments, they have to cover both the principal and the interest. The interest is going to be paid first, and we'll see that in the table a little later on, and eventually you pay off the principal in larger and larger portions until you've paid off the house. But the bank is going to want their money first, and you'll see how that works in a minute. So we're going to use an amortization table to help us figure that out. So here's an example. Jill and Jeff need $112,450 to purchase their new home. Their bank is willing to lend them the money at an interest rate of 12%, amortized over 25 years. They set up the following amortization table to be able to follow their progress in paying off the mortgage. Some of the calculations, as you will see, I've started them off for you so that we can kind of follow along. Now we're going to assume that this particular mortgage is compounded monthly and paid monthly, but that is actually not how a Canadian mortgage works. I just wanted to start with this one because it's more similar to the questions on compound interest that we did recently, and we'll get through the specifics of how the table works, and then we'll add the extra layer of a Canadian mortgage. So the first thing we're going to do is calculate the interest that's monthly, and the interest that's monthly is based off of the 12% compounded monthly. So from previous lessons, we've seen that 12% compounded monthly has to be converted into a decimal, because a percentage is always converted into a decimal, so that would be 0.12. and you're dividing by the compounding frequency, which is 12 because it's 12 months in a year. So 0.12 divided by 12 gives 0.01. And that is the interest that is going to be charged monthly, okay? So here's how the table is set up. We have these 5 different columns where we're going to have the payment number in the first column, the monthly amount in the second, the interest portion in the third, the principal portion in the fourth, and then the principal remaining in the fifth. And right now, because we are just starting off paying this mortgage, all we have is how much money we owe, which is $112,450. So here's what the first row would look like. Now the monthly payment amount, I'm just going to reveal the next couple of rows here. The monthly payment amount is something that the bank has figured out for you. So that $1,184.35 is going to always be the same number. Now we're going to see how that number is calculated a little later on. For right now, I'm just giving it to you, but I want you to see that that column is always going to be the same number. The interest portion is going to change, and so will the principal portion. So where does the interest portion come from? And this is where the table gets a little bit confusing, so I'm going to try to explain it with colors, and hopefully that'll help you see. So in order to calculate the interest, we're going to take the principal remaining, and that's going to give us this number by multiplying by the interest that we calculated, which is the 0.01. So I'm just going to grab a calculator here. So if I do 112,450 and multiply it by 0.01, I get the 1,124.50. Okay? So you're always going to multiply your principal portion times that interest to get your interest portion. Now, the principal portion, this is how much money you're actually spending on bringing down the cost of your home, which is the $112,450. Where did this number come from? Well, that number comes from the fact that you're taking the $1,184.35, you're paying off $1,124.50 in interest from that monthly payment, and the leftover gives you this number. So it's just a subtraction of those two values. If we subtract 1,184.35 minus 1,124.5, we get the 59.85. And then, if you understand what's going on, this is how much we paid on the principal. This is our original principal. We're trying to lower this quantity. So that means I am going to now take my principal, I'm going to subtract this number to give me my new principal. So I've paid $59.85 off of my principal, which is $112,450, minus the $59.85, and that gives me the $112,390.15. Sorry. Okay, so I'll run through that again. If you can understand what's happening, it makes it a lot easier. So look at the title of the column. We're trying to calculate the interest. Well, the interest is always calculated off of our principal. So our principal is $112,450. We multiply that times our interest, which is 0.01. That gives us the interest portion. That interest portion is going to the bank, but we paid the bank $1,184. The difference will give you how much money is left to pay off your mortgage. If we're paying off the mortgage, we subtract our principal by this number to get our new principal. And we keep doing that, okay? The difference is now, to calculate my interest, I'm no longer using my original principal. Now I'm going to take this number, multiply it by 0.01 to get my new interest amount. I'm still going to subtract these two numbers to get this one. I'm paying this amount, the monthly payment to the bank. They're taking $1,123.90 as interest. The leftover goes to paying my principal, and you'll see that my leftover increased just a little bit, 60.45. I then subtract these two numbers here to give me my new value. And you keep doing that over and over and over. So I'm going to show you on a spreadsheet here what happens if we continue doing this over and over again. So in this cell, I want to calculate the interest. So the interest is going to be equal to that'll be this number times 0.01, and then my principal portion is going to be equal to this number minus this number, and then my principal remaining is going to be equal to this number minus this number. And if I take those values and drag them down, it should fill in all of the numbers for me. And what you can see is as time goes by, the amount that you're paying on the interest goes down a little bit, and the amount you're paying on the principal goes up a little bit, so that eventually you're going to pay off your principal. Now, let's see how far we have to go here before we actually pay off the house. So I'm going to grab the last few rows here, and I'm just going to start to drag down. So we'll stop there and see where we're at. So we're still not at 0. Let's go a little bit further. Oh, so I met 0 somewhere because I'm in the negatives. So let's go up. So right here is basically at the next payment, I'm going to pay off this house. So I'm just going to delete the rest of these here so that they're not in the way. So 300 payments later, we have paid off the house. Now, how much did we pay for that house? If we did 300 payments of $1,184.35, let's calculate how much that would be. So let me bring up the calculator here. So we did 300 payments times $1,184.35. And that $112,000 house, how much was it when we started? $112,450. We have paid $355,305. Let me try that again. $355,305 for that $112,450 house. And if we subtract the original amount, we can find out how much interest that is. And that's $242,000 in interest. Now that's at 12%, which is actually quite a high percentage for interest for a mortgage. But still, you can see that the bank has set it up so that they're going to get their interest paid off way before. Like, look at how small the interest payments start to get near the end here. They're going to have the majority of the interest payments paid off way before you pay off the entire principal. Now, I'm not going to get you to do an entire table. When I ask you to show me that you know how this works, I'm going to get you to probably fill in the first 4 rows. And I want you to do 4 rows so that you can clearly see and show that you know how the table works, and that it shows the actual change in the interest, it shows the principal changing, and it shows the principal remaining changing. Now, in the previous table, we were doing compounded monthly and paid monthly. But as I mentioned before, a Canadian mortgage isn't compounded monthly and paid monthly. A Canadian mortgage is a little bit more complicated than that. What they do is they compound semi-annually, but they pay monthly. So that means the interest is compounded twice a year, even though you're paying every month. And our math doesn't do that. So we have to make it do something similar to what it did before. we're going to take that compounded semi-annually and paid monthly. We're going to transform it into what we call an equivalent payment structure, which means that it'll pretend to be paid monthly and compounded monthly so that we can do the math, okay? And the way we're going to do that is we're going to calculate what's called an equivalent monthly interest rate. And I'm also going to show you how that quantity that's the same all the way through the table, okay, the monthly payment here is the same. I'm going to show you how that's calculated as well. So the equivalent monthly interest rate is a way to make the math think that we're compounding monthly and paid monthly so that the math actually does what a Canadian mortgage does, okay? So we're going to use the same information from above, but we're going to do the Canadian version of it. So it's still going to be that $112,450. It's going to be 12%, but this time it's for a Canadian mortgage. So the first thing we're going to do is calculate the equivalent monthly interest rate. This is a new formula that will be given to you on a formula sheet if you need it. You just need to know when to use it. Okay, so I called it the I equivalent. EQ stands for equivalent. So that's going to be your key to understanding that this is the equivalent interest rate. And basically what we have to do is substitute the I into this calculation. Now the I that we're going to use is the semi-annual interest rate. Okay, so this here, just get my tablet working here. This here is the semi-annual interest rate. So what do I mean by that? So this number right here comes from 12% divided by 2, which is 0.06. So this is because it's a Canadian mortgage. Okay, so you have to remember that a Canadian mortgage is a semi-annual compounding, so we're dividing it by 2, and then you're putting that I value into this formula to change it into a monthly interest rate. So what is that going to look like? Well, let's take a calculator here and do this calculation. So bracket 1 plus 0.06 bracket to the power of, and I have to do to the power of 1/6. That needs to be in a bracket. So the power of 1 divided by 6, and then minus 1. And that gives us 0.0097. We're going to use that, I think. 0.0097. We'll just round it to that value. Okay? Actually, let me just check here. Actually, let's round it to 9.8 because that is a 5.8 right after there. So we'll round it off to 9.8. Just so that it's a little bit more accurate. So the next thing we need to do is calculate that constant monthly payment, that what we call the blended monthly payment. And this is done using tables. Now the tables look like this, and this is not a great scan. I got it out of a textbook a long time ago. But basically what it shows you is the number of years at the top. So 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, 25 years. And then it shows you what the interest rate is, and it shows you the interest rate on both sides. Now this is for a loan of $1,000, all right? Our loan is $112,450, okay? Now, we had said, and I'll just go back here, that Jack and Jill were doing, let me just check here. This is over 25 years, and it's 12%, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to look for 12%, which is way down here, and 25 years. So this is the number that I need for this mortgage, the 10.319, okay? So that's where we get this number, and that's for every $1,000 borrowed, but we're borrowing $112,000. So how do we calculate what our payment is going to be? Well, what I have to do is I have to divide 112,450 by 1,000 to find out how many times how many thousands of dollars are there in there. So we're going to divide by that number. And then we're going to multiply that by the 10.319. Okay. And the banks have these charts that they use to figure this stuff out. So let's do that on our calculator here. 112,450 divided by 1,000 times 10.319. So that's $1,160.37. 1160.37. Okay. So that is going to be the quantity that goes into the table over and over and over again. So 1160.37. Let me go to the table here. So here we're going to put 1160.37, 1160.37, 1160.37, and 1160.37. Okay, so that is called the blended monthly payment. Just to recap, that is calculated using this kind of chart, finding the interest and the length of time, taking this number and multiplying that number times your principal divided by 1,000, because it's the amount of money per month for every $1,000 borrowed. Okay, so dividing your principal by 1,000 tells you how many $1,000 you borrowed, and you multiply that by 10.319 to find that equivalent monthly interest. Now we're also going to need our not our equivalent monthly interest, our blended monthly payment. This is the equivalent monthly interest. So 0.0098, we're going to need that number down here too, because I'm just going to write okay. So we're going to take this, we're going to multiply it by 0.0098. And that's going to give us this quantity here. So this setup is exactly like the previous table now. So 112,450 times 0.0098 gives 1102.01. Now we're going to subtract these two numbers here. Let me use a different color for that, sorry. We're going to subtract these two numbers here to give us this new number for our principal portion. So I'm paying $1,160.37. I'm subtracting the amount that the bank gets, which is $1,102.01, which gives $58.36. And then, like before, I'm going to calculate with these two pieces of information. Right here, we're going to subtract those two numbers to find out, because the 58.36 is the leftover that's paying off my mortgage. So I'm going to subtract those two amounts. And that gives me $112,391.64, which is a little bit less. All right. And then I start over with the new principal amount. I'm now going to multiply that by my 0.0098. So let's do that. So the $112,391.64, we're going to multiply that by 0.0098. That gives 1101.43. We then subtract those two numbers, what the bank is charging us, what they're taking as their interest. So let's subtract those two numbers. And that gives $58.94. And then the last thing we're going to do is subtract our principal minus that value to get our new principal value. So I'll do that my calculator. So 112, 391, oops, 0.64 minus 58.94 equals 112, 332.7. I'll just double check that number because my memory is not great. 112, 332.70, yeah. And then you just keep doing that. So for a Canadian mortgage, you have to calculate your equivalent interest amount using the semi-annual compounding frequency of a Canadian mortgage, take your interest rate as a decimal, divide it by 2, sub it into this formula. That's going to give you your new equivalent interest, pretending that we're doing things monthly so that the math all works. Then using the chart right here, you calculate your equivalent, your blended monthly payment. I always get those two messed up. You calculate your blended monthly payment, take your principal, divide it by 1,000, and multiply by that number you got in your chart. That tells you the amount that's going to be repeated over and over as your monthly payment. Here. And then start doing your calculations like the other table and this table now. Take your principal, multiply it by your equivalent interest. That gives you your interest amount. Subtract what you're paying to the bank by your interest amount to find out how much is left over to pay off your principal. Subtract your principal by that number to get your new principal, and then start over. Multiply by your interest, subtract those two, gives you this. And if you practice that, you should be able to remember how it works and be able to complete any assignments that are coming up. That's it for the lesson. We'll see you next time.